Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. My, uh, um, my name is Greg O'Grady, and I am the chair of the Newfoundland and Labrador Stuttering Association and a co-host of Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering, along with my co-host.
And I'm Katelyn Mayo. I'm a student and an aspiring speech language pathologist, and I am the other co-host of Some Stutter Love podcast.
Some Stutter Law mission is dismantling and rebuilding stuttering one word at a time. Our mandate is, in the spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador humor, robust and frank interactive discussions. Some Stutter Law podcast aims to rebuild confidence and hope for today's and tomorrow's person who happens to stutter by dismantling stuttering myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers.
And some of the objectives of Some Stutter Love podcast are supporting, raising awareness, and increasing understanding and acceptance of stuttering, providing people who stutter, their families, professionals, students, and the general public with current information, research, and resources about stuttering, and promoting the NLSA mission of advocacy and support for people who stutter.
Today's some stutter law guest is Chad Feehan. So welcome very much, Chad, to our podcast, and thank you again for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on.
So, Chad, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and as a person who stutters?
That's a where to start. I well, I've stuttered for as long as I can remember. I think my parents said that it wasn't right as soon as I started to talk, but about a year after. But I don't have any memory that anyway. But as for me now, I mean, it's hard to know where to even begin because it's like the ecosystem that I exist in all of the time. It's a prevalent and pervasive influence that kind of informs quite literally everything. I think it's like it's a pretty major. I'll use the word affliction. I know some people don't like to word it that way, but I feel afflicted, so I'll use that. Yeah, so it's very influential. It has a lot of it has like more ramifications than I could probably even think of.
Chad, when you say that your stutter is a major affliction and in influence influence in your own life. Would you mind giving some example how they impacts your life, like professionally, personally?
Yeah. Speaking is terrifying all the time. uh, like constant um, co- constant dread and anxiety in like any and all speaking actions, which is especially challenging being an extroverted social individual, because those two aspects of me are diametrically opposed to each other and are they're always at odds. So I being being a person that does thrive on the energy that I get from being around others, it's extra challenging to connect, even though I do okay, surprisingly. I know that I think maybe other people find their stutter isolating. I haven't quite found that, even though there are isolating aspects of it, but I've managed to do okay with like connecting with others, so that I've been fortunate in the way. On a professional level is like another story. It's I do find it like very challenging to navigate the professional world, as I personally find the anxiety and dread a lot like worse. So jobs and my career path, it's all very much an uphill climb with like no shoes, like on a mountain, and it's freezing. So.
Like Chad, like, are you involved with any other supports? I mean, any other people that stutter as a support system? Any people stutter support groups just as a support?
I've got two friends who stutter. And if there's a third and a fourth who I'm not thinking of right now, I'm sorry, but I can, off the top of my head, I can think of two, and my uncle stutters. I don't talk to any of these people nearly as much as I could, and probably should. And I'm not really in any support groups or anything, even though I should. To be frank, I'm like kind of like the type of person who like kind of ignores the problems, and it's not a good thing. So to anyone else out there who's ignoring their problems, and stuttering happens to be one, it's best to confront it. And I've been like doing better recently in that way. I've been like doing my like vocal practices like a lot more, and like people around me can tell like when I've been doing so that's cool. But like I find the people who I do have around me most of the time are just very supportive anyway, and they like understand and are empathetic. So I'm definitely fortunate in that way. But I could and should probably like join a support group, because I do know there is one here, and I would obviously find the value in that, and when people who share similar struggles come together, there is a lot of like value and support, in that. So.
Yeah, I think the support group you're talking about, Chad, is the Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association monthly support group, and that it happens every the third Thursday of each month at 7 o'clock, and we used to meet at the Reed Center, which is the Summit Center, part of the recreation complex, but now it's been a virtual meeting, and that's the third Thursday of each month, and there's one tomorrow night. Chad, I'm wondering now, what's your perspective about the emotional component of stuttering? The stuttering iceberg, the 10% of the stuttering is above the surface. That's the physical characteristics, the secondary characteristics, and below the stuttering iceberg, which all is the 90%, which is the shame, embarrassment. What's your thoughts about the mental health component of stuttering?
Yeah. The mental component is like, it's like incalculable. Yeah, that is like most of it, if not like all of it. I mean, it's hard to know where to start because like for me it's like kind of like everything. It makes like navigating your own life like so much more than it needs to, and uh, even when you're around people that are totally understanding and empathetic towards you, and I speak for myself here, that like profound dread and anxiety, and I guess shame to an extent, and that's still there. um and and like I'm like a clinically diagnosed with anxiety, and it's it's like definitely a vicious circle where the stuttering influences the anxiety influences the stuttering, and it just kind of spins like that, kind of like a car spin, like a car wheel spin on snow. And it's very crippling. Even when you, even when I can intellectually know that I don't need to worry about this, but on an emotional level is like it operates in like a different set of neural pathways than what you can logically know. So even though I know that I don't need to feel an intense dread while ordering a burger and fries in a restaurant, that mental emotional part of that is just in its own set of uh, uh, ways. And I think most people who stutter like might be able to like empathize with that, I would think.
Oh yeah, definitely, Chad. Because based on my own personal lived experience as a person who stutters, I feel that as the research says that 10% of the stutter is above the surface, the 90% below the emotional. I really feel deep in my own heart that 1% of the tip of the iceberg is the actual stutter and the secondary. And 99% I feel is the emotional, which unfortunately goes untouched. Is not being dealt with professionally. And I mean, no fault to the speech language pathologists and whatever, but I feel that we really need to address the emotional component of stuttering. There's a definite need there for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, that's I would think that would be aspects that are addressed in support groups and stuff like that. And like 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 I'm a mess constantly, like so I and like I can speak about that with like irreverence and humor. But the reality of it is like, yeah, I'm like a mess all the time. I do function, but like I barely function. And I think people would probably tell me that like I do better than I think, but like we're all our critics.
Katelyn, do you have any questions for Chad?
Yeah, I kind of want to honestly, kind of for both of you, just based on this conversation that we're having, because I am someone who wants to work as an SLP eventually in my life, and I'm actually planning to do 2 master's degrees, one in SLP and one in counseling psychology, so that I'm able to address that emotional component. So based on your experiences in speech therapy and in treatment and just in life in general, what are some ways that a speech language pathologist could help address that emotional component and help treat that emotional component and support an individual who stutters in that emotional side of things?
I guess addressing it at all would be great. Now I went up through K to 12 doing speech therapy. I think the last bit of like through the school therapy that it was in grade 9. And I definitely don't remember any of the emotional aspect being addressed. Now I graduated in 2007, so I obviously can't speak to whatever the recent situation is. But I only really found out that I was like a person with anxiety when I was 18, which really like super profoundly recontextualized my whole childhood. And one of my first thoughts at that time was, why didn't anybody tell me this when I was like 11? Because like that would have been great to like have that self-understanding before I'm like nearly out of my teens.
Mhm.
So I guess just addressing it at all would be wonderful to
Mhm.
any kid who's struggling. And like, it's probably like hard for parents um, to realize that their kid has like uh, issues in that kind of way, but like it's it would be. I would hope that things are like moving towards that. I would hope so.
With me, Katelyn, it's interesting when I first retired in 2017 and started on my walk and run in Newfoundland. I connect with the NALASPA, which is a Newfoundland Labrador uh, Association of Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists. They asked me to come and speak to their conference in 2018, and there's about 100 SLPs there in St. John's. And so I walked in feeling very confident and whatever, and I had a PowerPoint presentation, and then they just wanted me to share my story, my lived experience. And then during the presentation, I became very emotional. Once I started to get in touch with the emotional component, and so which was really embarrassing because that wasn't like me. But anyhow, so there's a number of SLPs in the audience. Well, they thanked me very much for becoming very emotional. But they were very forthright and they said, Greg, we are not equipped to deal with the emotional component of stuttering. And it's as obvious, and as I was saying, there's no disrespect to the SLPs because and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, you see the emotional component is not really addressed in the SLP's curriculum. You deal with the physical component. So what you're doing now, Caitlin, is excellent because I applaud you because you're on the right path because I feel, and like SLPs are lay people. They're not equipped to deal with anxieties, depression, all that stuff. I mean, they can talk about it on a surface level, but to get in touch with the emotional component, I mean, that's a lot of grief. There's a lot of well, what I call it, Chad, the emotional component, the below the surface. I call it the secret scary. It's the one that the listeners do not see, the one that we deal with constantly, and it's the darkness. And so SLPs sometimes they link you to psychiatrists, psychologists. It's okay, but it's difficult to have two therapists working with you in correlation. So I think ideally, in an ideal world, what you're doing is great because you'll have the clinical clinical mental health component, and that is so sadly lacking. And I think that's what we need. Like I've
Yeah.
taken therapy for a number of years as well, but we talked about going out doing exercises in the malls and doing our speech therapy practice. They talked about the fears and the embarrassment, but you need to get into the depths of it. And Chad, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I feel that, and this is Greg speaking. A lot of the people who stutter, we either are not aware of the depth of the psychological, I guess, issues below. We avoid it or avoid it. So I think that's something that we all have to deal with. But it's a scary place to go. And this is where we need people like you, Caitlin. This is my soapbox.
I think that's a valid soapbox to stand on because um, if the SLPs aren't equipped to address what ends up being most of the issue, then the then the child is not equipped to they're it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be
Chad,
even though
oh, no.
like even though moves are being made, they're kind of not enough, you know.
Yeah. And you also made a good point, and Caitlin, this is important for you as well, that Chad mentioned his parents wasn't aware of the anxieties, and you see, parents are not even aware of all the emotional component, and it goes for spouses as well, like partners, significant others. I think it's a whole there's a whole circle of care that needs to go into therapy, and because it's so I think this is the parents, the family, spouses need to be supported as well. In other words,
Yeah, it's the best when like everyone's on the same page, everyone's aware, it's all understood, and the empathy is there, and the patience. And like I don't mean to imply that if a parent isn't aware of the emotional aspect, that they don't have patience and empathy and understanding, but there just needs to be more of that forever, really.
so Caitlin, you have your hands full for your studies.
I have big dreams, big plans. My brain never stops, so I've got all these big ideas, and just hopefully I'll be able to implement them. And being part of this podcast and hearing what people have to say, I'm just keep adding more ideas and things I want to do, which is great because I'm hearing what people want, which is awesome.
Excellent, excellent. Good to hear. Good to hear.
I think what you're doing here is like necessary, and it's given me the opportunity to like speak about it like frankly and with a like aspect of public vulnerability that like I don't normally open up. Like I'm like vulnerable in other ways, but I usually just kind of keep this like in the back room and like don't really like talk. But it's definitely like an elephant in the room. So I think if this kind of thing can help others to like not do that with their issues, and that's great.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Chad. Because like I actually feel that the more that we as people start talk to each other, share our stutters, this is this is how we're supporting each other, and we do need the support of each other. We do, because stuttering impacts all of our quality of life. It's a quality of life issue. It impacts our career choices, our decisions, our behaviors, perspectives, and this is the dark hole I'm talking about. And I think where people stutter, I feel that we have to be very careful and to mind our minds. It's too easy to go on that slippery slope of being depressed. You know what I mean? So it's a slippery slope. But anyhow, so the more we talk to each other.
I didn't quite catch the last thing you said there.
Oh no, what I was saying that people who stutter, we have to really sort of be gentle with our own minds in terms of I feel that we're a very vulnerable population emotionally, and it's once we get into these dark places, we lose perspective and affects our decisions, our behaviors, relationships, personal, professionally, career choices. So it's a lot that we have to be on the guard for, but this is where we need the support of each other. Because I feel the more that we understand stuttering, especially the emotional component, it really helps us to be better equipped to deal with our daily lives.
Yeah. And I'm like also totally up for collaborating or contributing in some other way. If there's anything I can help with, I'd be interested.
Thanks a lot, Chad. So Chad, we'll have to close now because we hear Luca tuning his ivory pianos with the music, so we're running out of time now. So thanks again for everything, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
All right. Thanks for having me on, and I'll see you again.
Some Stutter La, Newfoundland's first podcast about stuttering, has so much to talk about. Let's start listening.
This has been an episode of Some Stutter La, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about stuttering. Some Stutter La is hosted and produced by Greg O'Grady, Katelyn Mayo, and Paul DeDecker. Some Stutter La is available on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. To ask a question, send us a comment or suggestion, or just to get in touch, find us online on Instagram at Some Stutter Podcast and Facebook at Some Stutter La Pod. Thanks for listening.